Hello. This is another video about web development because web development is cool and fun and sick and I love it. Yay! So today, we're going to be talking about a couple of things. Going over some more resources. I did give a lot of resources in my last video, but I've got some more because the resources, they're plentiful. And as I keep discovering more, I will keep sharing more because I think that's important because free and open source stuff is very, very awesome. Besides that, I also wanted to talk about another beginner web development project that I think is pretty easy learning curve, not too difficult, and doesn't really require even JavaScript. So super beginner, HTML, CSS mostly if you really want to, but does require a little bit of some designing, so it's also that. Alrighty, so one of the first things that I do when I'm going into making anything is I'm going to design it. So I want to plan things out first, and in order to get an idea for what I'm even going to make, because I get artist's block super easily, I would say. So I always just go to Pinterest first, just so I can always get ideas, because even if I do know what I want to do, I actually don't know what I want to do. So I always go to Pinterest for my inspiration, usually make a board for it, or if it's similar to another project I'm already doing, I just build upon another board and just start adding things, looking up different ideas, different concept, colors, layout type, all that great, awesome, wonderful stuff. And I put them all together, and if I'm feeling extra saucy, then I'll put it into a little presentation or something like that. Sometimes, I like to use Notion for a lot of things. It's great note taking and great just keeping track of everything, but I like to take a lot of notes and just write everything down. I used Google Docs before, but it's it's kind of annoying trying to format everything in like a Word document type of thing. So Notion has some other functionalities that just makes it a little bit easier for me to keep everything all organized. So I've opted for using Notion for laying out, I guess, my actual word and text and stuff, and then having links for different things works well in Notion, and then I just kind of keep everything in my Google Drive. But that's kind of what I've been doing. The next thing I do is creating the design for the page in whatever design program you want to use. I use the Adobe Suite. I'm probably going to keep using the Adobe Suite for the rest of my life. I am very much for using open source and free alternatives. I do not know any that work really well at this time. I just have been using Adobe so much just because I have access to it, but in the future, if I do find some other alternatives, I will recommend. I will say that I have found a good Illustrator alternative, which is called Vectornator, which is only available on the iPad. It might be available on desktop, but I'm not sure about that. But it is available on the iPad, and it works very well. So I would say there's a lot of apps on the iPad that, if they are not free, they are cheaper, significantly cheaper alternatives to a lot of programs that are on desktop. So I will update with a lot of resources on that. But I am all for finding free alternatives to Adobe software, because I do think that Adobe softwares are ridiculously expensive, and for their functionality, it should not cost that much, because sometimes things are very, very buggy. After you have design your web page, you want to download all your assets, and you want to make sure you name all your files very specifically. It helps speed up the process in making your web page later on. But you want to group everything. You want to download all your PNGs. I would suggest using SVGs if you can, if you are using vectors. But if you can't use vectors, or if you're not using vector drawing program, a very high quality PNG would work better. You can also try and make some of your assets in the browser, but I do think that there is more freedom that you have by being able to make certain assets in external programs and then importing it into your web browser. It also helps to make sure your web page doesn't look like everyone else's. It doesn't look very basic, because there is limited functionality that you can do in the browser, especially as a beginner, because you may not know how to create super complicated things. I suggest using external design programs, but obviously anything is possible, and whatever route you want to take, go for it. Next, you're going to open your code editor of choice. I like to use VS Code, and I have a very lovely theme on it, if I do say so myself. But you're going to open your code editor, you're going to recreate your web page design that you've made using the assets that you've also downloaded from the web page. That's kind of what makes it easy about making your web page in a design program too, because you can export some of your assets and it kind of saves that time when you're recreating it with the code. So you're gonna recreate your web page as best as you can. You might hit a few bumps in the road, but that's when you use some of the resources that I mentioned in my previous video, like the MDN web. I actually don't think I mentioned the MDN web docs in my last video, but MDN web docs and W3 schools, that's when you use those resources to, figure out certain things that you are not entirely familiar with. Some design programs also have plugins that help export your designs into code a little bit easier. I know Figma has a plugin like that. I haven't used it before because I don't really use Figma. Adobe XD has a couple of them. I have them, but I haven't really tried them because I just honestly don't trust them that much, and I kind of want to learn things for myself, so I've refrained from using them, but I would give those a try if you're interested, see how they work. But I kind of feel like they'll just turn everything into a bunch of div and spans, and I don't really want that, so that's why I just work on recreating it myself, because you'll probably produce slightly cleaner code than whatever plugin is gonna try and convert it into. The last step is to host your website, and if you're feeling a little bit saucy, you can buy a custom domain too. There's some custom domains you can buy that are like $1, so it's not that bad, and it's like $1 for a year, I believe. So there's some things you can do with that, but there are some free hosting platforms. I use Versal because it looks pretty cool. There's a lot of analytics in it in the future. When I'm trying to create bigger projects, I know that I'll be able to monitor all the analytics very easily, and it's not behind a paywall. I think it's 50 free websites before you have to upgrade, so it's pretty solid. I think I'm going to be using it for a minute, and I really love the UI. It makes everything super easy and super clean, laid out, perfect. I absolutely love Versal. So if you're not really that big on some design stuff and you want to enhance your design skills to better your web pages, I'm going to provide you some resources that are all free and can help you significantly, especially as a beginner. You want to make sure that when people come to your page, they can read the things that are on your page. I do see sometimes that some beginners choose some very poor type, and it can honestly really ruin the way that your web page looks. And I think that there's some small tweaks that beginners can do as beginner developers that they just don't do because they don't really care. But design does go a long way, especially when it comes to final presentation. So the first resource I would recommend is Google Fonts. It's a free and open source library of fonts that can be used on your websites or in other applications. Google Fonts also provides a simple way to embed the fonts into your websites using CSS. You can just copy and paste the code right into your files. It's super duper easy, and because you don't want to add every single variation of a font into your web page because it's going to make it very slow when it's loading, you can select which ones. It's super easy, and you can swap them out very fast. I love using Google Fonts. It's probably my go-to when I'm picking fonts. Another resource I would recommend is Font. It's a free platform with a bunch of fonts that you can use for personal or commercial projects, and they also provide a preview for each font, making it easy to see how they'll look in different sizes and styles. The last resource I would recommend is not free, but you can buy a subscription for it. It's Adobe Fonts, and I know I'm using the Adobe cloud for everything, but it does have some pretty good things in there, and it is useful sometimes. So Adobe Fonts does have some pretty nice fonts that I love to check out. They have over 14,000, so there's a good amount of variety in there. So it also has web fonts that you can use on your website, and you can upload them into your design programs as well. I didn't mention that in DaFont. I don't know in Google Fonts if you can download and use in your design programs, but I do know you can do that with DaFont. So you can do that with Adobe Fonts as well, so you don't just have to use them for your websites, you can also use them in your design programs. Moving on, we have color palettes. So you want to make sure that your websites don't just look dull. You don't want to use colors that don't really go together. You don't want to use colors that are too bright because you don't want to, burn everyone's eyes and stuff like that. So two resources that I have for colors are coolers.com, which has a bunch of resources. They have a color palette generator from images. They have a bunch of color palettes already in their library, and they have different ways that you can type in to search up for your color palettes. You can type in mood, you can type in colors, there's filters, so many different things. There's some paid premium features that it also has, but the main core features that I use are generating color palettes from the images and some of their ready-made color palettes that they have on there. Those are, in my opinion, the most useful ones, but like I said, there's a bunch of features that you can also upgrade to. There's a way to swap out colors. It provides hex codes for everything, or whatever codes that you want for your colors. Easily swap out colors. And I also love that all the colors have like super cool names. It just is a sweet little touch, especially when I'm creating design decks for clients. Since everything has a name beneath it, it kind of makes it a little bit more inviting and a little bit more fun for people to see. So that's something that I really like. And the second resource I'd recommend is Pinterest. It has a vast database of images that can be saved and organized into boards. I talk about Pinterest so much. I do use Pinterest for color palettes sometimes in combination with coolers. I like to use the image generator, especially if I find a color palette that's on Pinterest, because sometimes it has the hex code, but it's like super tiny and super blurry, so I can't really extract the color in the way that I want to. So I'll just pop it into the image generator and I can color pick it that way instead, and then I can just download my color palette. And with coolers, you can also download your color palette and I believe upload it into design programs as well. So that's what makes coolers pretty useful. These are two free resources that I use very regularly in my design process, and if they were to leave the face of the earth, I would be very upset. And lastly, I have a few resources for content, so image, videos, and music, which I know is like the biggest thing that people need for their projects, because it's very difficult to find high quality content anywhere. So the first resource that I recommend is Unsplash. It's a stock photo website. They have so many high quality royalty free images that you can use. You can search them up, a bunch of different choices, and the people that provide the images on there provide very high quality, rich photos, super duper beautiful. I use Unsplash all the time, and there's a lot of variety on there. It's very rare that I type in a search into Unsplash and no pictures come back, so I would use Unsplash very regularly in my projects. Another resource I would also recommend is Pixabay. It's another stock website, but instead of just having photos, they also have videos, music, sound effects, all that stuff. I use Pixabay for basically everything that isn't on Unsplash or all my music and my videos and stuff like that. I usually go to Pixabay for that because they have a lot of sound effects and music that I can't really find anywhere else, so Pixabay is usually my go-to. It does have a bit of a limited library, but the people that do upload the sounds on there, they're doing their best, so I gotta hand them, I gotta give them some credit. But yeah, Pixabay is my go-to for that. And the last resource that I have, alright, I'm gonna have to put a little bit of a warning on this because I know some people are not going to use this tool properly, but using YouTube and MP3 and MP4 converter is useful depending on the content that you're using. You cannot just be converting copyrighted material and using it for whatever you want because you will get in trouble, so be careful using this. But there are videos on YouTube that specifically say that they're royalty free and you can use them in your personal projects, or there are sound effects or certain things, and depending on what kind of video someone has made, if you want to extract a certain clip from it or whatever reason, you can do that with a MP4 and MP3 converter. I do like to use the MP3 converter for a lot of sounds because it is easier to find certain sounds on YouTube than it is anywhere else, especially when it comes to sound effects that like I said before, aren't on Pixabay. So I use the MP3 and MP4 converter for more of a last resort kind of thing. I do prefer to find it on Unsplash and Pixabay because it's just a little bit easier to download it that way. But yes, I do think that it is useful to use an MP3 and MP4 converter, and I looked it up on Google. It says it's not illegal as long as the content, is fair use. So you can do it as long as the content is fair use. It's just a warning. Don't, take Disney videos and stuff like that. Okay, you have been warned. But that is all I have for this video. I hope that what I've said is useful, and I hope that you can use these resources in your projects, and you can also use the project that I mentioned. I think it's a great way to kind of have a beginner sort of portfolio if you're not really comfortable to build a full-blown portfolio website yet, and you kind of want to make something that will serve as a nice contact page that you can kind of put on your resume. This is something very easy that you can do, and I think there's a lot of flexibility, so there is ways that you can kind of still make it stand out without it being too complicated. But if you enjoyed this video, you want to leave a like, that would be very much appreciated, and also subscribe, and I will see you guys in another video next week. Alrighty, bye bye.